Welcome to the PnPjs version 2 deep dive on selective imports video. In this video, we're going to begin by taking a look at the updated documentation specifically for selective imports. We'll then dive into the details surrounding selective imports. We'll look at an overview of how to take advantage of selective imports when using PnPjs version 2. We'll also look at the performance improvements between version 1 and version 2 of PnPjs when using selective imports. And then we'll wrap it up by taking a look at custom presets and how we can combine multiple selective imports into a single import statement. Let's begin by taking a look at the updated documentation for version 2. You can always get there by using the aka.ms/pnpjs URL. We'll begin by navigating to the documentation available at aka.ms/pnpjs. We can then locate the selective imports documentation by locating the transition guide found here on the left, clicking on it, and then looking for the selective imports section in the table of contents here on the right. And if we click on selective imports, it will take us to that section. Within the documentation, we find a short description identifying the benefits of using selective imports with PnPjs version 2. We also find a couple of very simple samples that identify how to take advantage of selective imports. We're going to dive deeper into the details and benefits of selective imports in our demos. But in short, selective imports allow us to identify the individual pieces of the PnPjs library that we need at that moment in time. For example, what if we were building a web part or extension that needed access to the properties about our web or our site collection? We wouldn't need the components of PnPjs that give us access to the lists or the fields or the content types. But in PnPjs version 1, it all came as a complete singular package. And because it was imported into our SharePoint Framework solution as one singular library, all of the code was included, whether we were using only one piece or not. This, of course, would unavoidably increase the size of our SharePoint Framework solution and could have a performance impact. Also included in this documentation is information about presets. Essentially, presets are a way of combining multiple selective imports into a separate file. And then within your SharePoint Framework solution, you can import that preset in a single line. And we'll show how to use a preset file as part of our demos within this video. Now let's jump into a demo of how we can take advantage of selective imports when using PnPjs version 2. In this demo, we'll begin with a simple out-of-the-box web part. And we're going to accomplish two tasks. The first task is creating functionality that will allow us to obtain web properties from our site collection. The second task is to increase that functionality to include list data from our site collection. Now I've already installed PnPjs version 2 for this solution, so the first step is to include the import statements. Now similar to PnPjs version 1, our first import statement is simply importing the SP object. We can do that by pasting in our code, and while this was all we needed to do for PnPjs version 1, in PnPjs version 2, this is simply an empty object. So if we wanted to access the web properties of our site collection, additional import statements are required. To help further illustrate this point, before we include those additional selective import statements, let's paste in the functionality for accessing those web properties first. I have a simple function that I'm going to go ahead and paste into our code and briefly review what this function is doing. It's making a simple connection to our web, looking to obtain the title and URL of our site collection. We then add that to an HTML string, which is then returned to an element within our web part to display that data that we requested. But you'll notice we're already seeing an error occur on the web connection request. This is because, as mentioned earlier, when we imported PnPjs, the SP object is empty. It does not include any code required to make a connection to the web. So we can fix this error by including the selective import for the web object. We see the error has now gone away, and our function should execute successfully. Now let's say we want to replace that functionality where we're connecting to the web and retrieving properties with additional functionality that connects to the web and retrieves list data. We'll go ahead and accomplish that by pasting in another simple function. This new function now makes a connection to our web and requests a collection of lists available. It then cycles through all the lists and updates our HTML object with that list of list names. And once again, we see an error occurring on our request for the list data. This is because the selective imports we've included so far are not requesting any of the code needed to connect to our website and obtain list information. So then to correct the error, we would add the selective import statement to include the PnPjs functionality to connect and retrieve list data. So let's go ahead and add that import statement. We'll drop them down to multiple lines, and we can see that the error on our lists object is no longer present. Now let's look at a demo that compares the performance improvements between using PnPjs version 1 and PnPjs version 2. We're going to accomplish the exact same tasks that we did in our original demo. Within the PnPjs version 1 sample, we're going to make a request for the web data, and then we're going to look at the bundle size. We'll do the exact same secondary request for list data and again look at the bundle size. We'll then look at a PnPjs version 2 sample where we accomplish the same tasks. We'll make a request for web data, look at the bundle size, and then look at list data request and look at its bundle size. You're going to see a significant difference. We'll begin this demo with a simple out-of-the-box web part that's using PnPjs version 1. We've included our import statement, the only import statement needed to accomplish the desired task of connecting to our site and obtaining web data. This function is accomplishing the exact same task as our earlier demo did in this video. It's retrieving web data, the title and URL, and then updating an HTML element with that data. So let's now execute a gulp production bundle and examine the resulting JavaScript bundle file size of our solution. We can do that by calling gulp bundle --ship in our command prompt. And now that our bundling is complete, we can see the file size is 201 kilobytes. Now let's replace the simple web connection request with a list connection request. We'll paste in our function with the new updated code, and then we'll update the request. Now what we've done is we've increased the logic of our component. Instead of just requesting the web properties, we're now requesting information about the lists within our web. So let's re-execute our gulp bundle request and see if the resulting JavaScript file size has changed. For good measure, we'll go ahead and manually delete our bundle and we'll clear our screen. And we can go ahead and execute our gulp bundle production request. And now we can see even though we've increased functionality, the file size is exactly the same. As a reminder, with PnPjs version 1, it doesn't matter how simple our functionality is. Even if we're using the smallest piece of PnPjs functionality or logic, the entire library will be bundled into our solution. Selective imports, though, available in PnPjs version 2, change all of that. Because with selective imports, we are identifying only the areas of the PnPjs library we need, those are the only areas that get bundled into our solution. So now let's flip over to a demo of a web part built using PnPjs version 2 and selective imports. We'll include the exact same functionality and make the same gulp bundle production requests, and then we'll compare the file sizes to see how they differ. In this demo, we're again using an out-of-the-box web part. Now I've already installed PnPjs version 2, I've included the import statements to connect to the web properties, and I've included the functionality necessary to accomplish that task as well. So let's go ahead and execute the production gulp bundle request and see the resulting file size of our JavaScript bundle. We can do that by pasting in our gulp bundle request and executing the command. The bundle is now complete, and we can see that the resulting file size is significantly smaller than it was with PnPjs version 1, where everything in the library was included. This no doubt has a significant performance improvement impact that we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But first, let's update our web part to include functionality that requests list data from our site. We'll go ahead and replace the existing function with the new code necessary to make the list connection. Of course, we see an error occurring on the list object because we did not yet include our selective import. So we'll do that now, and then we'll update the feature function request. So now we're ready to re-engage our gulp bundle request. Let's go ahead and delete for good measure, and we'll clear the screen. We can now go ahead and paste in our gulp bundle. So now that the bundling is complete, we can see that our new file size is only slightly larger than it was when we were only requesting the web data. Initially, you may be thinking that's not a huge differential to go from 201K down to 65K or 74K, but let's jump over to a slide and take a look at the actual percentage differences. Let's take a look at the file size comparison side by side. Starting with PnPjs version 1, we know the file size was 201K. When we were selectively importing the web and list objects, it was 74K, and with only the web object, 65K. When you include the percentage changes, it's astounding. 63% decrease in file size for the web and list objects, and a 67% decrease when we're only needing the web object. Imagine if we had multiple web parts or extensions on a single page, all using PnPjs. With PnPjs version 1, that would have meant a complete redundancy for the library in every solution. Each web part or extension would have included a full copy of the PnPjs library. Now though, with PnPjs version 2 and selective imports, each SharePoint Framework solution can include only the necessary parts of the PnPjs library to accomplish the desired task. Let's now take a look at a demo of how we can include multiple selective imports into a single import statement using presets. In this presets demo, we'll begin with the same web part we last used in the previous demo. We're already including the selective imports to request the web and list data, and our functionality is already there in place as well. The first step necessary to set up presets for our selective imports is to create a preset file. We'll go ahead and do that here. New file, and we'll paste in the name pnpjs-presets.ts. In this TypeScript file, we're going to include the import statements of the components of PnPjs that we need. They will be the SPREST object, the webs object, and the lists object. We'll then export a new copy of the SPREST object. We can go ahead and save, and now we can go back into our primary TypeScript file for our web part, remove the individual selective import statements, and replace it with an import statement from the preset. So we'll go ahead and click on our web part TypeScript file. We'll go ahead and delete the import statements, and of course we see an error is now occurring on our SP object within our function. It's to be expected because we removed the import statements that include PnPjs. So to fix that, we'll go ahead and paste in the import statement for our preset. We're simply pointing at the preset, importing the SP object that we had exported, and now we see that our request to the list object is no longer throwing an error. No doubt this is a very simplistic example of creating and using a preset. The PnPjs GitHub repository, though, includes additional samples that show deeper functionality when it comes to presets. You can find those samples by going to the root GitHub directory for PnPjs. That's located at github.com/pnp/pnpjs. Once you're there, you'll locate the samples folder, as seen here, click on samples, and you can find another folder called Project Preset. Thank you for watching this PnPjs version 2 video on selective imports. For all the latest and updated documentation on PnPjs, visit aka.ms/pnpjs.